I'm Susan Roney O'Brien, and I am bringing you the amazing Kathleen Fagley, who is a Pushcart Press nominated poet, whose chapbook, How You Came to Me, was published by Finishing Line Press in July 2012. Her work has appeared in the Stillwater Review, Memoir Journal, Cutthroat, the Comstock Review, Connotations Press, and most recently, the Fourth River and Nimrod International Journal. She teaches creative writing and creative nonfiction at Keene State College in Keene, New Hampshire. Just a note before we start, next June 23rd, we have Sarah St. George, who is going to be our reader, and June 30th, I'm going to be the reader. July 28th is Susan Boucher, who is a first-time fiction author, and she's amazing. Richard Fox is in August, so we have a lot of people coming forward. We have a lot of people that we missed because of the virus. So I appreciate so much that Kathleen has agreed to read tonight. So I'm turning the microphone over to her. And Kathleen, thank you so much for reading. I'm really happy that you're going to be part of this wonderful series.
Well, I'm so grateful for your hospitality, Worcester County Poetry Association. And I thank you, Susan, for making this possible, because I have to be honest, I forgot that I signed up for the 26th. And when you said, I said, what? What did I do? But I'm glad it worked out.
Yes, me too.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Bob, for handling my last minute request. I'm going to begin by reading from my chapbook, How You Came to Me, and I'm reading 2 poems from that. And I'm beginning with this because when I received my MFA, this is what I talked about my son, Evan. And that was the first thing I felt the necessity to write these poems. So this is in response to trying to figure out why my baby was so disabled. Evan has extensive handicaps, and it's hard to believe he's 39. But these poems came out of his childhood, his early childhood, when we were trying to grasp the diagnosis and getting bits and pieces of information. But as a mother, I knew something was terribly wrong. Fragile X. Was it cat scratch fever, dirty box, virus, doctor's red scrawl, telling me to retake the test? Was it the water, the artesian well run dry, the raw hamburger, coats of polyurethane on floors, the stink of that? Was it my great-grandmother's evil eye, Uncle Dominic, who died of fright, they said, locked in the dark basement of Morris Street? And the great aunt who fell backwards when she heard the news, her young husband crushed between 2 trains. Aunt Gertrude's St. Vitus dance, the fragile X, chromosome or missing tip of the 4th. Was it something I dreamed? My mother's voice when she found out, the pain of that. And still the children knock on the door. All Hallows Eve, the witches and bats, their voices soft as they retreat. It was a really difficult time, and that summer, 1981, was also, for some reason, bats kept reappearing in my life. And this is another bat poem, one other that I'm not reading. When summer turned to ash, shiny jars of peaches, mouths or squishy vulvae pressed against glass, line up on metal shelves, winter's cache. I snap green beans in half. Sourdough ferments in cabinets, dark and warm, yeasty bubbles rise. You sleep under the eaves, quiet as death. Ants in the southeast corner make more noise. Your father walks the spine of the roof to drive fondue forks through a nest of bats. They scream out with little voices. Did you hear him? His steps overhead? I force open the wooden door, swollen with summer heat. Around my ankle, the cat whines and purrs all the time, satisfied. A single bat lies on the threshold, crushed deposit, color of wood ash. I kick it into dust with bare feet. And my husband really did go up on the roof with fondue forks to attack the nest of bats. And I think he was partially successful, but the ants remained all summer. One of the things I got really interested in a few years ago was the raid on Deerfield, Massachusetts in 1704. It's not far from here, and I've been a few times. In 1704, and I'm going to use the word Indians, which is not politically correct now, but back in 1700s or the 1600s, they would have used Indians, and that's why I'm using that. The Indians raided the town and took 200 citizens on a forced march to Canada and killed some other people, and some other people survived in the village. So I tried to get into the psychological disassociation a young person might experience when they have to leave their house, which in the 1704, in that period of time, the house had such significance and such a grounding for the people. So that's one thing I want to say. This is written in the form of the pantoum, which is a form in poetry. So the second and fourth line of each stanza repeats as line 1 and 3 in the next. So it has this returning obsessive quality, which for this poem works. Let's see. I don't want to say too much. In 17th century New England, there was a belief that the parts of the house were representing parts of the body. So there was an analogy between the house body, and that's where homebody actually comes from, the house and the body. So for instance, the clapboards of the house would be the skin of the house. The pediment over the door would be the eyelashes. The windows would be the eyes. The hearth would have significance in the heart. They even had the breast was represented, and I forgot what part of the house. So that's also something I want to say. And in this associative returning poem, you're going to hear 2 quotes from Thomas Dekker. The head is a house built for reason to dwell in, and thus is the tenement framed. And he wrote that in 1605. They borrowed a lot from Elizabethan tropes, so they were influenced still at 1605 with the medieval period in England. This is the descent. I am always descending through a narrow passageway surrounded by family, in front and behind. We are whole and entire before the shivering in the hall. Through a passageway surrounded by family, the hearth glows, reflected in diamond window panes. We shiver in the hall despite layers of clothing, my shoes worthless in snow. Hearth glows, reflection in window panes. Outside is chaos, the town is burning. We are shivering through layers of clothing. The head is a house built for reason to dwell in. Outside is chaos, the town is burning. Our house stands. Praise its bricked-in walls. Head is a house built for reason to dwell in, and thus is a tenement framed. Praise its oak ridge and plate. If you return before I, brother or sister, praise our tenement wonderfully made. Burn juniper, rosemary, wood of alloy, make a sweet sounding noise. If you return before I do, brother or sister, look up to the crown post, praise its maker, sweeten the chambers with wood of alloy, shut the upstairs window, dust the snow from the sill. Praise the strength of crown, heft of chimney stack. I am always descending through a narrow passageway. Shut the window, dust the snow from the sill. Surrounded by family, we are whole and entire. That's Canton. And one more from the book on Deerfield. There was a young 8-year-old boy, Samuel Russell, that as he was brought on this march got lost and no one could find him. He was never found. So I tried to envision myself going on that march and seeing Samuel Russell and not seeing him. Now this poem, the title is also the first line of the poem. The rest and Samuel Russell came softly after. Snow muffled his footfall, silent as Indian steps. Great Lake frozen, he came softly after. He was there and not there, not crossing the lake, not begging for food, not behind me, not carried by the Indians or pulled by sled across the wide expanse. He came softly into my memory when I counted the children in the village and asked what became of Samuel Russell. In my mind, I could see his face, his small body. Each child became Samuel Russell, then not in the church, not in the woods, not in the carrying place. After that, his memory faded. Who he was, who his parents were. His presence that last day became soft as the snow falling, which made the crossing of the lake possible for me and not him. Somehow he fell behind. Somehow he fell under a tree, behind a bush, rested in a snowdrift, and drifted into snow, becoming white and whiter until he was no more. So my father died in 2008. He died after a fall in a nursing home. And this is my poem for my father. Losing time. Who is this man who breaks my heart at last, in the 8th decade of life? His face a wrinkled walnut, he holds in his hand, his heart a wind-up clock, losing time. This is my sad sack, greatly depressed father, in clown pants that don't even reach to the black Velcro strap shoes, his shirt buttoned up to the top. My father, who doesn't look like he belongs anywhere or to anyone in this subacute, understaffed unit, dressed in pants that don't even belong to him, and has missed his lunch because I came, and when I leave, he will fall out of his chair and so begin his end. Where's Laurie? This is dedicated to us, Laurie. Is she here still? Let me see where my sister is. I don't see her. It's the time of the mind. Our family had no secrets. My grandfather called my brother crazy, waved him away. I paid no mind to him, nor my squeamish cousins who covered their ears when he screamed. He was a flashing billboard with sound effects, autistic before it was a spectrum. He was at the extreme end, not autistic-like or autistic-light. No, he had a full-blown case. I thought that my sister and I would be inoculated against further disorder, but that is now not how genes work. We had our one tragedy, I wagered, as if loss were metered out by a righteous God who kept a ledger. My sister and I became the parents we never wanted to be, special. Actually, that's for my daughter and son also. Hi, Eric. So what do you do when you're depressed? And this is what my routine is. I make my bed, and once I make my bed in the morning, the rest of my day sort of falls into shape, but I have to make my bed, and I'm meticulous about tucking in corners. This is a short 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a sonnet. It's not a rhyming sonnet. Making the bed. Unable to find the strength or desire to rise from bed, I think about the first task of the day, and this focuses my attention, not the sunlight pouring under the edge of the shade, nor the smell of coffee. I travel the perimeter of the room's largest continent, this perfect rectangle, tucking in messy corners, smoothing the covers to erase the disorder of the night before. This bed, a monument of order over chaos, lives in a room which will be empty for hours. No one to see this work. My precise practice kept inviolate. I got obsessed with White Island in New Zealand, and I wrote a poem called Wakari. It's actually it is White Island in New Zealand. And I tried to place myself on this hike to see the inactive, supposedly, or not active volcano. Wakari. We follow the leader single file, feeling like school kids, walking through the safe parts, avoiding pressure mounds. The release of steam and ash can be sudden. If so, grab the gas masks. The noxious gas can slow you down. Under your boots, sulfur-encrusted earth crumbles. You have come this far today, further still to the rim to peer inside the steaming cauldron. A citrine green lake appears, then disappears like a mirage. Mesmerized, do you hear the witches' voices? Double, double toil and trouble, fire, burn, and cauldron bubble. Someone calls you away and deliberately you walk back, almost relaxed as if this was not an active volcano, and you are not in danger, because we always are. The thought came to you this morning, then went away, like the cloud shifting before you. All right, this is another short poem, and I went to Copenhagen. I went to their museum, and they had a room that had a sarcophagus, a bronze sarcophagus, which is a cemetery stone with figures on the top, and a superb lyrebird from Australia. And I thought, how strange this juxtaposition of the superb lyrebird and the sarcophagus, but mostly the name of the bird. And he's just an unusual bird. He makes sounds, he recreates sounds in his environment. So he could do chainsaws, he could do ignitions of cars, and he imitates all these sounds. And his tail is in the shape of a lyre. So the superb lyrebird is off his continent. Having relocated to a Danish museum, he is unpacked from a wooden crate, displayed next to an Etruscan couple lying on top of the sarcophagus. He will never escape his plinth, flash his feathers in a mating dance. He is lean and hungry for air and light, closely monitored in this room. Here he is silent and still. The couple have each other, entwined in an embrace. They swell with desire, right before our eyes, as if they could turn at any moment and cover their exposed feet. When I was thinking about landscapes, I was thinking that I hate deep water, but I've always wanted to be able to swim across a lake. So I tried to imagine what it'd be like to swim across a lake. What would be the sounds? What would be it like to be in water? And there's reference to Gardner Bay, and that's a bay on Lake Sunapee in New Hampshire. My husband's family had a summer place on Garnet Hill there before it was sold just recently. Journey. Midway across Gardner Bay, she is swimming a perfect Australian crawl when she begins to think, love is like a lake, unknowable in its deepest parts, black water even at midday. Thought breaks her rhythm. She becomes conscious of her body. white, chalky skin covered in goosebumps, her thin, reedy breath. Fishermen say this part of the lake is unfathomable. Miles down, there may be rivers and caves. If she let herself go, she would drift down through glacial history to the lake's beginning, a sandy bottom rippled like mussel. Cold currents wrap her limbs like snakes she kicks off. She moves forward, breaking the black water into pieces of shimmering crystal. Floating on her back, she hears the sound of the lake humming, a resonant like a finger rubbing the rib of a singing bowl. Then closer to shore, another sound, a knocking on doors, doors opening and closing, scraping of wood against wood. A brush of silver coin fish moves through her, as if she were transparent, as if she did not exist. All right, I'll have a few more. Is everyone okay? All right, let me go on with Suffer the Frogs. I'm just gonna clear my throat. Frogs are one of my favorite animals or species. Suffer the frogs. 1, come to me as you did 20 years ago, in abundance. A forest of frogs set in motion by my steps. Polished green jewels in the frog and mist, the only color that day. I broke through some cloud, a lack of clarity. A miracle, I thought, and still do. Now my miracles are lean and few. 2, I learned you backward by dissection. Pale underbelly slit, coiled intestine and eggs the size of infant tears, skin folded back like an envelope. White human-like legs held in pincer grass, frogs tossed, stuffed in boys' pockets, thrown in girls' laps. I felt you once in my open palm, your body a muscle that leapt into vanishing. 3, gone from the hills of California, cloud forests of Costa Rica, your porous skin, the chemicals and poisons you generously take in. Cold-blooded amphibian, you are misnamed. I name you Oracle of the Setting Sun. Just recently I've always been interested in the book, The Wind in the Willows, and I love the black and white illustrations by Ernest Shepard, who's done many books, especially children's books. So I tried to imagine this domestic interior of the tree, the hole in the tree, and rat and badger and mole sitting in the living room, described as having their smokes and what have you and dinners. So this is a poem from A Human at a Wooden Door, After the Wind in the Willows. Listen, a ruffling of leaves, the invisible world beneath your feet, inside the hollow of the tree, a shuffling of slippers, a whiff of pipe smoke, sweet cherry wood. Don't disturb badger, mole, and rat. From his hand, poetry drifts to the floor, a roaring fireplace and Victorian tchotchkes on the mantelpiece. Outside it is snowing hard. Signs are vanishing, hollows becoming black menaces, pitfalls to be avoided. You will find your way back, but just. You have wandered from the wide world to the wild wood where the animals live, and you are not welcome. So this is the river rat poem, and mole is in this poem also. The river rat, sprung from his whitewashing job, mole burrows his way out into spring, dancing his way to the river, the first river he has ever seen. It looks like animal's fur in the sunlight, brown, then velvety blue-black in late afternoon light. Sometimes a shade of jade, sometimes black as obsidian in its depths. He finds Rat's home tucked underneath the bank. The river is his life, he tells Mole. It's brother and sister, aunts and company, food and drink. Rat asks Mole, what have you been doing if you haven't been on the river? My last poem is When I Turn the Linens. This poem came entirely to me, which never ever happens. It was not revised. And I did it in a session with Kate Gleason, Writing from the Heart. I think she gave us some props, and from there I made this poem. When I turned the linens, a flutter of butterflies flew out the window, orange and black winged, the single blue and gray single-tipped quiver. They had been in the bed all night, jewels resting in the dark warmth between my thighs, in my hair, curled around my toe, and then morning light, a few threads at a time, through filter of silky drapes, touched my forehead like grace, lightening the pillow, the comforter we threw off hours before. I saw the blue brighten, its slow creep through skin and sheets. Huddled wings of butterflies began their wrestle, brush of fur against mine, imperceptible weight, like an airmail envelope being opened slowly, the message like mist, then the falling steady rain, then its travel elsewhere. Thank you so much for being such a great audience.
You were wonderful. You were absolutely wonderful. What wonderful poems. I'm so glad I got to hear you again. The last time I heard you, you read from your chapbook, but I didn't hear later poems. And this is spectacular. What wonderful work you're doing.
Oh, Susan, thank you so much. Thank you. I have a great critique group also, and some of them are here, Ginny and Constance. We give each other support. And many of these poems they've heard. Ginny, hi.
Yeah.
So thank you. Hi, Ginny. I see you. And I think Constance is here also. And there's my daughter.
It's good to see faces.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are you writing now? What is your plan for the next few months? Has the isolation helped you write or stopped you from writing?
It's been helping me actually, because this is my natural, I don't go out a lot, so it seems normal for me. I hate to use that word. So my project is to work more on the wind in the willows.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Yeah, and that sort of goes back to that Danish idea of hygge, coziness. There's a Danish word that represents coziness. It's hard to pronounce, Hyggge. So I'm going to stick with that idea of coziness because I need it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Does anyone else have any questions for Kathleen? Please unmute yourselves and ask.
Yes, please, anything.
I just want to say how much I enjoyed these poems. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Heather McPherson has to Eve. I have a question for Kathleen. It's in the chat.
Okay.
Let's see if you can open the chat.
Yes, it's the Wind in the Willows I discovered when I took childhood literature in college. I had read it as a child, but then I just got enamored with the text, and it was so deep in many ways. I just love that book. I think it's an adult book also.
Oh, yeah.
And what draws me to it is that idea of enclosure and coziness and a creation of a domestic interior, even though it's animal centered. There's no humans there.
Right.
According to Kenneth Graham, the humans have moved on to the wild world and they live in the wild wood.
Makes sense to me. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions? Any other things you want to ask Kathleen? She's such an amazing writer, and it's such a pleasure to have her here. I'm so glad that you allowed us to
Oh,
come
thank
into your home and listen to you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, go ahead.
Someone had a question about the Frog and Toad series by Arnold Lobel. I'm familiar with that. Also, children love it. And he has an interesting relationship with the Toad character. So yes, it does resonate with The Wind in the Willows.
Yep. Well, we have someone in the audience who is a savior of turtles. Do you write anything about turtles?
No, I have not written about turtles.
That would probably be a good thing to add to your list.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
It's funny, my husband also grew up spending summers at Lake Sunapee, and one of the stories he tells that is most charming to me is he had one of those little turtles you get at like a department store, you know, and it would have that fake palm tree in a little plastic container. But one day when he was like, I don't know, 9 or 10, he took the turtle swimming with him in Lake Sunapee, and he did not lose the turtle. Swimming together.
Oh, that's such a good story.
Yeah.
I remember those turtles. I think all of the like that died eventually. And the colored chickens too.
What seems to happen in these Zoom readings is that they go much quicker than I expect them to go. So it usually ends up being about a half an hour to 45 minutes instead of our usual 2 hours at the Thirsty Lab. But we also don't drink a lot of wine and talk about other things. So maybe that has something to do with it. But if everybody is done, are you all happy with what you've heard? And please applaud to wish our beautiful, wonderful person a wonderful week.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Kathleen.
Thank you so much.